Do you think there's value to have a secret police force in the United States?
No.
I'd swear there's the like it's the scariest shit you could ever have.
Because other countries have them too. So if we don't have one, we're basically with our pants down geopolitically. So I understand. But it's when it gets turned inward that it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Is there a way to have one without turning it inward?
No, of course not. Yeah. It's the Ring of Power. Okay. And I grew up reading Tolkien. It's the Ring of Power. Everyone thinks they can wield it. Everyone thinks I have the moral character. Let's say you can, but your son can't. You pass it down to the next generation. Someone's going to fail in that line of dynasty. It cannot be wielded. I actually had this conversation with Seb Gorka, who was actually an instructor for counterterrorism resources. He would teach FBI analysts and agents how to understand terrorist ideology. And so Seb's kind of a neat guy. He's also a gun guy, which I like a lot. And so the two of us were talking about this, and he said, I can't even brag to my European friends anymore that we don't have a secret police. The FBI is an intelligence agency first, primarily. You know how I know it? Because they told us. Yeah. You can actually go, your viewers can go on, they can search what's called the DIOG. It's the Domestic Investigations Operation Guide. That is the FBI playbook on how they institute investigations. Well, and most of it is unredacted.
They can, easier than that. I'm on FBI.gov right now. There's a timeline. The section 2001 to 2008, it literally says, for the FBI and the nation, a new era of national security had begun. And then it gets into more about 9/11 and how intel needs to be the most important. Here, right here. The key to that new mandate, Director Mueller knew, was intelligence, the holy grail of national security work, the ability to collect and connect the dots, to know your enemies and the threats they pose inside and out, to arm everyone from leaders in the Oval Office to police officers on the street, blah, 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 blah. They come out and tell you.
It's right there. I went to FBI.gov. It says what we investigate. Intelligence is a.
It's the primary thing. When you look at the DIOG, which tells you how you can open a case, what the predication has to be, what the levels of cases are. We do things that are called. There's no probes, by the way. You'll be shocked to learn this. Of all the FBI probes that you've read about in headlines, there's no such thing as an FBI probe. It's either an assessment, which there are multiple types, or it's an investigation, and the investigations are either a preliminary or a full. That's it. Those are the three things: assessment, preliminary, full. And all of those, the first thing they say, it's FBI as intelligence agency, is the number one thing they talk about. Then they run through it. Then it goes FBI as a law enforcement.
Well, the FBI was originally called something else, wasn't it?
It was called the Bureau of Investigation. Yeah. They lie about when they were founded. The Bureau of Investigation was founded in 1908. Okay. It was founded in 1908. In 1934 or 35, it became the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This was all under Hoover. The same guy ran it, but they changed names. Go look at the United States Air Force. It was originally called the Army Air Corps. The first day of the Army Air Corps turning into the Air Force is the Air Force birthday. They don't claim like, well, we were created during World War II in the 1944. They're like, no, they claim it's either 1947 or 48. My Air Force friends are going to be pissed at me that I don't remember. But in September of 47 or 48, I believe, the Air Force became the Air Force by decree, and it became something else. Look at the DOD. It used to be called the Department of War. Yeah. When it became the Department of Defense, it had a new birthday. When you change your name and become a new entity, you get a new birthday. The FBI claims 1908, and it's lying.
Well, here's what
we got to call it the Department of War again.
I know, 100%.
Well, I call it the Department of Offense. So the history of the FBI says in 1896, the National Bureau of Criminal Identification was founded, providing agencies across the country with information to identify known criminals. The 1901 assassination of President William McKinley, created a perception that the United States was under threat from anarchists. The DOJ and Labor had been keeping records on anarchists for years, but Theodore Roosevelt wanted more power to do so. The Justice Department...
like a secret police? I don't know.
Well, so what it says is, on May 27, 1908, Congress forbade this use of Treasury employees, the Secret Service, by the Justice Department, citing fears that the new agency would serve as a secret police department. Right. Again, at Roosevelt's urging, Bonaparte moved to organize a formal Bureau of Investigation, which would then have its own staff of special agents. So how are you? You're saying that they've been around for a lot longer than that.
Well, no, they came around in 1908. That was when it became the Bureau of Investigation. So you went back into the 19th century. That was the initial. That was like them basically trying to figure out are there patterns of crimes. They were first learning about how to do fingerprints and stuff like that. That's what Hoover was famous for. He basically got the first national archives of fingerprints and things. So he was organizing that, and he was a young, ambitious guy. The Attorney General Bonaparte basically has this created as the Bureau of Investigation, 1908. The FBI claims that as their birthday, 1908, because it gives them legitimacy. They're only 89 years old, but they want to claim to be over 100 years old. Right. Why would you do that? For legitimacy, for that patina of legitimacy, which I think
what's their real birth date?
1934 or 35. I think it's 1935 Act of Congress.
They say the creation of the FBI was 1933. The Bureau of Investigation was linked to the Bureau of Prohibition. rechristened the Division of Investigation. It became an independent service.
So there was 1 year where it was called something else, and then the FBI specifically 35.
35, you're correct. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the real birthday. And if you're an honest agency, why would you lie about your birthday? You know what? Meet a woman and ask her what her birthday is. If she lies about that, she's going to lie about other things. That's weird. That's a weird thing to do.
They could argue 1896 according to the.
Well, they might. Don't give them any ideas.
Right. But can we abolish it?
Can we or will we?
Well, I mean, so let me put it this way. There are a lot of people who say abolish. A lot of people say defund. And the reason I bring it up is because there have been arguments made that the president can, by executive order, just say no more FBI.
Yeah,
that's Vivek's claim.
It's part of the executive branch. So I think, there's a groundwork that could be laid for that. I don't think it's going to happen.
Would that even be a good idea?
Yeah, for sure.
You think so?
Here's why. Here, let me throw why. In 2020, under the COVID hysteria, my field office, which was the second biggest field office in the country, I think Washington Field is the second biggest. It's New York, and then it's either LA or DC. One of the two, top three, doesn't matter. They told everybody in the biggest thing that if you listen to Attorney General Garland yesterday, is it yesterday that he was talking or is it the day before? Day before. Yeah. So Wednesday, when he was talking, he said the most important things the FBI does are all national security related. That's what he said. His words, not mine. I don't care. They shut down national security in Washington, DC. They had the national security agents, of which there were probably a couple hundred, working on all the threats in the national capital region, which you would think would be a big deal. All the spies, all the traitors, all the terrorists try to do bad things. They had them show up for 30 minutes a day, 2 times a week. They took a 50-hour-a-week job. They made it 1 hour a week. And did you see anything crazy happen in 2020? Nobody did. Nobody popped off. The Chinese still stole our technology. They do that anyway. They do it all day. We didn't see some massive surge of the Klan coming over and taking over anything. We just watched what happened when you take them down from doing their job to doing no job for 1 hour a week. And apparently we could reduce the FBI by 50x, not a small amount. You could destroy that in that area, and nothing happened. And nobody knew about it. In the same way that when we had a quote unquote government shutdown and people don't go to work,
nobody notices.
Nobody notices. If you work, the things that touch you for government are your local government. If the police stopped enforcing speed laws around you, people would do weird stuff. If they stopped investigating burglaries, people would get burgled. If you stopped investigating any of the things that are close by to you, either your police department or your sheriff's deputies, if they weren't doing their job, you would freaking notice. You can see it in places like Baltimore. You saw it in Ferguson. I know you guys have some experience with seeing that stuff. When that happens, it gets rowdy. When you take away the feds, they still don't investigate your $1 million fraud. And you still won't notice it. It doesn't matter. So what you could do is you could take that $11 billion, that $9 to $11 billion a year that we spend on the FBI. And what if you put that into a program where we cross-deputized senior state police officers who have a lot of time on the job and have been doing things well. And you said, not only do you have state authorities, which means they're going to be accountable to an attorney general that's elected in their state. That's good. You say not only that, but what if we just said you're cross-deputized under Title 21 and Title 18 to pursue federal crimes as well? So now your state police have the ability to bring a case to the Justice Department and say, hey, we're going to prosecute this federally. This is a federal crime. It crosses state lines, and I'm deputized to do so. But let's say it doesn't cross state lines. Now they have the state authority. And if that person sucks, they have to theoretically answer to their attorney general, who actually is elected. So you would have 50 independent laboratories of good ideas instead of one centrally run one out of DC with Chris Wray, who's a guy who's making $9.2 million the year before he started working as the FBI director.
Wow, what was he doing?
He's a lawyer. He's a white shoe lawyer. He was the guy that fixed Chris Christie's Bridgegate scandal. Do people know that?
And Chris Christie is the guy who recommended Wray to President Trump.
So you got a guy who was making $9.2 million the year before he became the FBI director, and now he makes $235,000 a year. Does anyone have any problems with what went on there? Why would you do that? Can any of you imagine walking away from $9 million a year and taking the decimal point at the end of your salary?
You're bringing in $750 a month or something like that.
Yeah, that's some social capital right there.
There's something very big happening there. And you know how I know that he's not committed to it?
He's a prince now.
I call him politically appointed princes. Yeah. He flies around in a private jet that the American taxpayer funded. It's a $60 million aircraft, a Gulfstream 550. I did a piece with Brandon Dre over at Daily Wire. We wrote a whole expose. They could impeach him over that alone. The way that he uses the private jet of the FBI, he flies around. Do you want to know what he actually pays back? Because he has to fund his personal travel. He has a security detail that drives him in a motorcade down to a plane. He's so lazy about this stuff, and he's so arrogant that Chris Wray has the jet, which lives in Manassas, Virginia. You guys know where that is. It flies to DCA, Reagan. It lands. It costs us $2,500 as a taxpayer to land at DCA just for the runway fee for the private jet.
But that's like
plus whatever it costs for a 30-minute flight from Manassas to Virginia. It's like 41 miles.
Yeah.
Okay. It flies 41 miles to meet him closer, so he doesn't have to sit on Route 66 on US 66 and drive out to where the
That's just
hangar
the
is.
suburbs. I'm like, what?
Yeah, correct.
That's just the suburbs.
It flies to him at DCA. He gets on the plane and then he flies to wherever he goes. Usually home to
what is that,
Atlanta.
a 2-minute flight
It's between 15 and 20 minutes, depending on the pattern.
to fly. Oh, because you can't just go up and down.
Yeah, right. You don't just direct fly. You have to fly up, then you have to fly into the pattern, then you have to fly around DCA, then you land. So it's short as 13 minutes, as long as like 21 or 22 minutes. People can actually go check out this plane in real time. It's a government aircraft. We all pay for it.
Look, man, traffic around DC. Oof.
Right.
41 miles could be an hour and a half.
$10,000 per flight is what I've been told the estimate is between wear and tear on the aircraft, the cost of operating the crew rest that they get from the flight, and the fact that we pay $2,500 in fuel and everything else. $2,500 just to touch down on the runway. People can actually check it out. It's all aircraft have a tail number, and his is November 708 Juliet Hotel. November 708 JH. That is our jet that the FBI flies for Chris Wray. It was bought under $60 million with the counterterrorism resources. It is supposed to be used for the counterterrorism investigation teams that go around and pick up, like let's say a big shooting happens. Let's say Las Vegas happens. You're supposed to fly an evidence team in that jet out there to do it. But they have to wait until Chris Wray is done using it because he uses it to fly home to Atlanta where his family lives and he lives. He's a geo bachelor 5-6 days out of the week because he didn't even commit after appointed for 10 years. He didn't even commit to living in DC with his family. His wife still lives outside of Atlanta. So if you go look at the Flight Aware, which people can do publicly, it's like a free resource. You could pull up where that jet goes. And here's what it does. On a Friday afternoon, it flies from Manassas to Reagan Airport. It lands. He gets on it. It flies him to Fulton County down in outside of Atlanta. He gets off it. It flies back to Atlanta. It sits there for the weekend. Then it flies back on Monday morning and picks him up, or Sunday night. Then it flies him back to DCA, drops him off because it's closer to the office. Then it flies back to Manassas where it lives. So we now have 6 flights for a man to basically just fly home the weekend. And do you know what he pays for that? Because that's private travel. That's personal travel. He has to reimburse the American taxpayer. Do you know what he pays?
What?
Like $200. Because he finds whatever the cheapest one-way flight is or the cheapest round trip on Spirit Airlines, and that's what he's responsible for paying out of his pocket. So he pays the commercial equivalent to the region. It could be a Spirit Airlines flight from Baltimore to like near Atlanta, and that's what he has to pay. It has to be in the same region. It doesn't even have to be the same airports because he flies into the private jet terminal. Yep. The dude is paying like $200 a flight for a round trip that costs the American taxpayer probably upwards of like $50,000 or more.
Sounds like corruption.
It sounds like a really good deal if you can get it. That's why he thinks he's a prince.
On top of that, he's got all sorts of strap hangers who go with him everywhere. He's got his own security detail. And if you're going for multiple days, you're taking multiple shifts because those guys aren't working 24 hours a day, but there has to be a security detail awake on him and his house or wherever he is, his hotel, wherever he is in the world, 24 hours a day. You got the flight crew who now they're in Atlanta over the weekend. All these people are getting paid overtime for working the weekend or weekend differential pay and night shift pay and all sorts of bonus pay for.
They bring in the local SWAT teams because those guys exhaust all the hours where they can, at some point in time, if you're a federal agent, you actually you do enough overtime, and there's only the people that are basically on protective details get it. But if you work enough overtime hours, you eventually start working for free because there's a cap at 174,000 and change or 176,000 changes year to year, like a little bit. But once you hit that amount of numbers, you can't make any more money. So when you're working overtime, they're actually not paying you the overtime rate. You're just doing it for free. And so at some point in time, those guys don't want to work for free. So they bring in local SWAT teams, which Garret was on the SWAT team in Kansas City, and they'll bring in the SWAT team who gets overtime pay so they can spread the love around so that everybody gets paid overtime, basically just sitting in a van, like hanging out, waiting for the FBI director to wake up.
I think it's beyond just the FBI. I think.
Oh, for sure.
We're looking at just the degradation of our institutions. Mm-hmm. It has become. Someone tweeted out, no one is trying to solve the problems. They're trying to get wealthy enough so the problems don't affect them.
Do you want to know what was on my screensaver when I was sitting my last couple of days in the office? Which probably didn't help. I had one of those demotivator posters that was like tiled across my unclassified computer. And it said, government, if you think we have problems, you should see our solutions. That was number one. And then the other one I had was consultants. If you're not going to be part of the solution, there's a ton of money to be made keeping the problem going.
Yep.
And so those are the two favorite things that like anybody who's worked in government knows those are true.
There's a concern that if we were to disband the FBI, if we were to shut it all down, that a lot of people would get fired and that they would go form their own paramilitary corps. Do you guys get that?
Sounds awesome.
That's what like the Ba'ath Party did in Iraq when we went in and just eradicated Saddam's government. They said, you can't work in the government anymore, you're out. They formed their own political ISIS. They formed.
Overwhelmingly, people that carry a gun for a living of all ilk, whether they be in law enforcement or military, they tend to be relatively libertarian-minded conservatives who don't want to get into your business. I would say that's been my experience. I was in the military. I've been in law enforcement in 2 different areas, and I was a paramedic before that, and I rolled around with law enforcement a lot. They don't want to mess with you. So having a bunch of armed people that care about your liberty sounds like not a problem to me. That's just me. They're not going to go out there. Now, the reason the FBI is slanted the way it is because agents only make up about just under 14,000. They're like 13,600 and change FBI agents. But there's
of like a 40,000 person institution.
But there's 36, 37,000, something like that, whatever it is. It's under 40,000, but it's over 35,000. So even though the majority of agents are relatively conservative minded, libertarian is probably they just are apolitical about a lot of stuff. They don't want to get involved. Even though they make up the majority of the people that carry the guns, they are the minority of the agency. And that's the case everywhere. When you have the majority of people that are interested in government and they work for the government, they're going to grow government. And they're the ones that are driving the train. Big time. It's scary stuff for people that have any interest in it because you look and you go, this doesn't make sense. People go, well, FBI agents are conservative. So what? They're not the ones telling people what to do. And then ordinary men,
they're just doing it.
Ordinary men, they do what they're told.
Yeah, Vivek said that when he's going to shut down the FBI, that it's going to basically terminate the positions of a lot of the bureaucrats, and that the agents themselves will be
his
moved to
numbers
the
are a little
Rangers.
off, but his ideas are good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We were just reading it on the way. It's like some of his numbers. It's like, dude, you don't need that many people doing counterterrorism investigations and national. He doesn't actually know because he hasn't worked in there. I've talked backstage with Vivek, and we've talked about like, I would love to consult with him. I was like, look, your numbers are off, but your ideas are good. Let me just say it very clearly. You have to put out a number if you're going to be a guy that's serious. You have to put out a thing. I would get rid of this number of positions and so on. His heart is in the right place, and his ideas would work fine. We would want to give some input about how to tweak it.
So you don't think the bureaucrats would go form their own like anti-American organization?
If you take the bureaucrats out of the equation, okay, the bureaucrats are the tyrants in this scenario, and they think they have power, and they use the power that they currently have, and they try to grow that power. If you take their positions away and you disintegrate them into moon dust, they don't have any power left. And they're not gun toters. They're sitting in headquarters thinking they're solving all the world's problems, when in fact they're making things worse for normal Americans by and large.
Think about Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Any power that your enemy thinks you have.
Yeah.
And so they use it. But the minute that they don't have it, they don't have it. The minute that people go like, no, imagine if 2,000 or 3,000 FBI agents who are out there who are doing this stuff and are disgusted, because there's a lot of them. We literally had this conversation this morning before we got to the studio. I'm talking to my buddy Steve Friend, and he goes, dude, if I was still working for the FBI right now, and I saw a Kyle Seraphin, a Garret O'Boyle, a Steve Friend out there talking about all the things that we talk about over a beer, about how jacked up the FBI is, and they're out there saying it publicly, and they got canceled for it, and they literally got canceled because they said they weren't going to do something that was wrong. He's like, I'd want to eat my gun. He's like, I would want to commit suicide. I would be like, I am doing something shameful and dishonorable. I'm not encouraging anybody to go do that, obviously. I don't think that's the right answer. But it's like, how jacked up is it that you're looking around? People go, how come nobody's out there supporting what you guys are saying?
Well, look at Veritas. Well, Veritas isn't around anymore.
No, but I'm friendly with the people that were there.
Look at how these investigations used to go. Yeah. You have these people who in private over a beer will admit to malfeasance and corruption, and then panic and beg when people find out.
That's right.
Because they have no problem engaging in evil so long as no one knows they're doing it.
My actual boss, when I told him that I was not going to do a nasal swab for any reason for every 72 hours because I didn't have the disease, and I have thousands and thousands of clinical hours training on disease process. I've worked in hospitals and I've worked on ambulances, and I've done probably hundreds, if not thousands, of nasal swabs for the flu. And nobody knows what happens when you put ethylene oxide up your nose, like into a mucosal membrane every 72 hours. That's crazy. Like they never tested that. Nobody knows. It's a carcinogen. So, if you tested for COVID I hope everyone's okay. But I wasn't going to do it under any circumstances. I tell my boss, and he goes, on principle, I agree with you, but I've got mortgage, I've got an alimony because I have an ex-wife, and I just can't stand between it. So I lost my paycheck for 2 months over this because it was important enough for me to do it.
Yeah.
And I just look at I got little kids, man. I've got a baby right now who's like 25 days old. And I've got 3 other kids. And what am I going to tell them when we look into a country full of tyranny? Am I going to go, look, at least your dad had a roof over your head during this time. I did nothing about it. I wasn't going to be that guy. That's just not the kind of guy I am.
That's why James says, be brave. And, now obviously he's doing OMG, O'Keefe Media Group, and Veritas is gone. But the idea is, he put this tweet out saying that if, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase him because I don't remember the exact words, but he was like, if you're participating in this, you are responsible for the future your children receive.
Let me say it easier. You cannot comply your way out of tyranny.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
You can't. And the other thing that I've been saying, and if anybody who's older than about 35 years old, anybody who's over about 35 years old will know this. The United States that I grew up in would have invaded the United States that we live in right now. I'm just saying. Like,
well, the funny thing is about the 2020
totally
election.
happen.
A lot of the things that people were pointing out in 2020 are used by the U.S. as a metric of a bad election in a foreign country.
For sure.
Yeah,
I ask guys that work for the CIA, because I got some buddies that are like CIA whistleblowers. They haven't come to public. Being a whistleblower doesn't mean you went to the media, by the way. It means you went through one of the approved routes.
Right.
And so I've got friends that have gone through the approved routes as best they can. And he literally goes, the number one thing you do when there is the potential for election corruption is you do paper ballots.
Yeah.
One person, one vote, identification of who that person is. Oh, you mean like apparently that's all racist if you're in America, but anywhere else you do it because that's how you legitimize elections.
Yeah.